Because I'm not gonna lie, having the MVP and the Defensive Player of the Year, that is a nice ring to it. The Brooklyn Nets in the past 20 games are 18-2, and it seems like there's no end in sight. After dealing with a terrible head coach, Kyrie Irving drama, and Kevin Durant not wanting to be a part of the team, it seems like Brooklyn has finally figured everything out. At the beginning of the season, I was very critical about this team, and my biggest issue was the roster. I did not think the coaching was that much of an issue, but oh boy was I wrong. And while I think there's improvements that the roster can make, it seems like Brooklyn has been able to make this work. About 3 weeks ago, I talked about the Brooklyn Nets, but I feel like I left a lot of information out and I kind of gave some players a bad light. And well, I think it's safe to say now, 3 weeks later, this isn't a fluke and the Brooklyn Nets might be the best team in basketball. Last season, the Boston Celtics had a terrible start to the season and many people thought this team would be nothing but a play-in team. Yet around February, they started to go on this run where they were easily the most dominant team in the East. Also, both teams were dealing with new head coaches. The Brooklyn Nets recently got Jack Vaughn and the Boston Celtics got Ime Udoka. Also, both teams had two superstar players at the head of the team. And as we saw for Boston, that really turned out well for them and they almost got an NBA title out of it. And Brooklyn is in that stage of owning the NBA. Now, there's a couple factors why the Brooklyn Nets have been dominating, but I think it starts with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. I'm gonna start with Kyrie because I was very critical of him in the last video, because in the last video, I said he was a head case and I brought up the fact that he gets in a lot of drama. But it seems like after the whole anti-Semitic post or however you want to talk about it, it seems like he's been fine. This season, Kyrie Irving, who is considered to be the second option on this team, is averaging about 26 points per game on pretty good efficiency. Also, just watching this team, I can definitely say the offense is flowing a lot better when it has Kyrie and Kevin Durant at the same time. I was watching the Brooklyn Nets and Miami Heat game today when Kevin Durant left the game around the third quarter due to an injury. Mind you, the Miami Heat were seeming to lead this game a majority of the time, but yet Brooklyn would come back and would win in a very close game. And sure, Royce O'Neal technically did have the game winner, but Kyrie Irving made a lot of shots and created a lot of plays for Brooklyn to be even in a position to win. In fact, with about a minute left in the game, the Brooklyn Nets kept turning over the ball, but Kyrie was very positive and really stepped up as a leader. And I have no doubt that if the Brooklyn Nets would have had Kevin Durant, they would have won by more than 1 point. But I found it interesting the way Kyrie was able to elevate his game at the right time. I was going to talk about the Kevin Durant injury in a Kevin Durant segment, but I'm just going to transition to that now because we don't know how serious this injury is. So around the third quarter, Jimmy Butler fell on Kevin Durant's lanky ass leg and he never came back into the game. At the time of recording this, we do not have an update about the injury. However, while I'm editing this video, if I do get an update, I'll put it on the screen right here. I'm not a doctor, even though I definitely went to Harvard, but from what I can tell, I don't think it's that serious of an injury. I'm hoping at most it's a sprain because I don't want this man to be out for a long period of time, especially for the fact that Kevin Durant is playing like an MVP candidate right now, and maybe he could win it. Recently, I made a video talking about the NBA MVP race, and I explained it in 9 minutes, and one of the players I talked about was Kevin Durant. My biggest reason was the fact that he was putting his highest scoring numbers since his OKC days. Also, for the fact that there is a legitimate chance the Brooklyn Nets could end as the 1 seed. At the time of recording this, they are 1 game back from the Boston Celtics. Like I said earlier, Kevin Durant is having some of his highest scoring numbers. This season, he's averaging 30 points per game, and his efficiency is the best he's ever had in his long career. He's averaging a 68 true shooting percentage, which I said this about LeBron in my last video, but the fact this man is this old doing what he's doing is insane to me. As far as the MVP goes, I think there is a good chance that Kevin Durant could actually win the award. He's playing well, and so is his team, but I feel like Jack Vaughn should also get a lot of credit for what's going on. I don't think we've been giving Jack Vaughn another credit. With Steve Nash's time in Brooklyn this season, he was 2-5. And not only did Jack Vaughn deal with everything that was happening when Steve Nash was fired, but the team is 24-8. And as far as the X's and O goes, the offense is running very smoothly. When it comes to running plays and having offensive sets, Jack Vaughn is by far a lot more better at that than Steve Nash ever was. I mean, even on the defensive defensive side of the ball, I feel like their defense is running a lot better, and they've been very good when it comes to communication. Also, I'm starting a dialogue, but Nick Claxton for Defensive Player of the Year. All jokes aside, even though that might not be a joke, Nick Claxton has stepped up this year. For the first time in his career, he's averaging over 10 points per game. On top of that, he's averaging 2.6 blocks per game. Now, I want to focus on his defensive stats, and not like blocks and rebounds despite me just talking about that. I want to look at some stats that most NBA YouTubers won't really show you. On the screen right here is Nick Claxton's defensive field goal percentage. Defensive field goal percentage is the field goal percentage allowed when he's the primary defender of his opponent, and that's about 40.3%. But if we look at another number that I find very interesting, the average percentage of his opponents is 48.4, meaning when Nick Claxton is guarding them, their field goal percentage on average will go down by about 8%. Also, his field goal differential is at negative 8.1, and he is one of the best when it comes to players that are defending about 10 shots per game. This is on the same level with guys like Robert Williams, Kawhi Leonard, Jarrett Allen, Giannis, OG Anunoby. These are some of the best defenders in the NBA, and we are seeing that Nick Claxton is hanging with them. I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of trolling about the Defensive Player of the Year thing, but this might actually need to be a dialogue. I'm looking at a lot of things right now, and what Nick Claxton is able to do in the interior for the Brooklyn Nets is insane, and I think it's why their defense is in the top 5. When it comes to their opponent's field goal percentage, the Brooklyn Nets are second, and when it comes to defensive net rating, they're in the top 10. And even though Nick Claxton as an individual is good on defense, I feel like he's bringing more to the Nets overall. I think because of Nick Claxton, the Brooklyn Nets have not only the lowest field goal percentage allowed as a team, but also they're in the top 5 when it comes to field goal percentage differential as a team. Also, his on and off court stats are very interesting, very telling about how he affects the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets have a negative 3.3 offensive rating differential when Nick Claxton is not on the court, which can be the difference from a top 5 defense to maybe even leaving the top 10. The point I'm trying to make, well, I think that Nick Claxton might actually be a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. And I gotta say, I wasn't that impressed with the player when he was under Steve Nash. I just don't think he was being utilized properly. I always thought Nick Claxton was a good interior defender, but of course he was. He's their main center, and he's mostly getting the most attention when it comes to interior defense. But Jack Vaughn has really utilized him to look like 10 times of a better player. And they say defense wins championships, and when you have a really good defense and a really good anchor on there, there's no telling how far this team can go. Mind you, I haven't even mentioned other players on the team like Royce O'Neal, who by the way really stepped up in this game, and even Ben Simmons, which we make a lot of jokes about him as a community, but I feel like we have to talk about how good his defense has been. Mind you, this is the same guy who is taking on the main assignment for the other team, and their field goal percentage will typically go down. Last time I talked about the Nets, I said I didn't know if this was sustainable, but I think I've changed my mind. Over the past 3 weeks, they've proven a lot to me, and that's that this team is dangerous. Whether it's the fact that they have Kevin Durant, who is playing like the MVP, and Kyrie Irving, who is playing very well, whether it's their bench that has definitely stepped up ever since I called them a bunch of G League players, or whether it's the fact that Nick Claxton might be the Defensive Player of the Year. Yes, this is a dialogue we're gonna start pushing on the channel. If you guys want to see a video on why Kevin Durant could be the MVP of the league, well, click the video right here. Because I'm not gonna lie, having the MVP and the Defensive Player of the Year, that has a nice ring to it.